Thank you very much for being with us. I'm interviewing tonight a fabulous young man named Adam Christensen. And before I bring Adam out, I want to talk for a couple of minutes about this race. I'm sure you have heard about the argument that AOC got into with a Republican congressman named Yoho. Now, Representative Yoho, he called her a bitch, and she had a rather extensive reply. He is serving in the district that Adam is running in. So that's what we're talking about here tonight, Florida District 3. Representative Yoho is not running again, and this is a flippable seat. Obviously, right now, held in the hands of a Republican, but a Democrat has a very good chance right now. And the man that you're about to meet has a very good chance of being the candidate. Now, we know there are different shades of blue. Long gone are the days when we say, oh, just vote blue. It's which kind of blue. And there is a major division within the Democratic Party. There are the corporatist Democrats, and then there are the progressive Democrats. The progressive Democrats holding on more to what I think of as the traditional values of the party and of our democracy. So Adam Christensen, what's particularly interesting about him is that he's 26 years old. And if/when he wins, he will take the seat as the youngest person to ever serve in the House of Representatives, 27 years old. Now, I'm not an ageist. I'm in my 60s myself. I think the older you are, the more you know certain things, and the younger you are, the more you know certain other things. But the House of Representatives particularly is a place where we need more young people. And the younger you are, the more you know what's happening now. The older you are, the more you know about some rhythms and some patterns that perhaps do not change. What we need in the House of Representatives, I believe, are more people who feel the kind of urgency about such issues as climate change, economic and criminal justice, as somebody who's 27 years old, like Adam Christensen, feels, and we can know would stand for in the US House of Representatives. I hope you have your credit card out, because so many thousands of people watch these interviews. If you are feeling moved by this candidate, know if you sent $5, if you even sent $1, we would actually give these guys a good night. And remember, it's harder for the progressives, such as Adam, to raise the kind of money that the more centrist or corporatist candidates can raise, because they are not being supported by the Democratic institutional fundraising arms. So let's get ready. Let's meet this man. Let's talk to this man. And if you feel it in your heart, please support this man. Adam Christensen, come and join us. Thank you so much for being here. Hi. Now, does he have to?
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
I got you. No, I got it. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good, Adam. And I'm thrilled to have you on with us. And I think that, an issue that you and I talked about a little bit before is I think a lot of people, particularly people your age, and for reasons that I understand, have lost faith in electoral politics and don't have, as I do, a kind of institutional historical memory of a time when they were absolutely sure that the government was at least trying to be on their side. So when people see someone like yourself, I think people are curious at the very least. What got you here? How is it that at the age of 26, you're running for Congress and doing so well at it? Not only that, but doing so well at it. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first I just got to say, I am thrilled to be on here with you. So when I first heard that you were going to be endorsing me, I'm not going to lie, I fangirled a lot bit, actually. It was very embarrassing. And a lot of our campaign did as well. So we have almost 50 people that are under the age of 23 running this entire thing. And I didn't really know who you were until the presidential primary, actually, one of the debates. And I was watching this debate. And the first time I heard you speak, number one, I was absolutely flabbergasted, because I was sitting there going, oh my word, I don't know how she just said it like that, but I love what she just said, because you were able to put words in a way that actually made me pay attention and listen and want to hear more. But you weren't just on the surface level. You were talking about deep systemic issues and putting it in a way that made people actually realize. The thing that got it from me, I will remember this forever, was the moment that you said wonkiness will not save us. I grew up in a Republican household. I grew up in the Midwest. And the one thing I know, and that I know that most people know who grow up in Republican households, is Republicans do not believe that either party cares whether or not they live or die. They care about how politicians make them feel. They care about how we can actually, and this is one thing, especially like we need to talk about, is for progressives for so long, we've had the best policies, right? We've had all of the best plans, but we've never been able to connect emotionally with people and get them to realize that we care about them. We care about their lives. We care about making sure their lives are better. And so for me, that's what all of our campaigns need to be about. It needs to be about people and making sure people are okay. So I wanted to say thank you so much for having me on. And I think I kind of answered your question through
Thank
that.
you. Thank you so much for your acknowledgement. And that's very kind of you. And I'm honored. Thank you. And also hearing how you just spoke to me and the passion that you feel about politics connecting to people makes me feel even more encouraged about your candidacy, because I'm sure that that same kind of passion and that same kind of genuine concern reads to the voters in your district in Florida. Tell us a little something about your district. Is that Gainesville? Is Gainesville your district?
Yeah, we got the University of Florida, we got Santa Fe College, we got Gainesville, part of Jacksonville, northern part of Ocala. We have Palatka off to the east. So it's really north central Florida. It's beautiful. I drove around the country. Like I started in Virginia when I first graduated college, and I knew I wanted to start a company somewhere. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to drive across the country and see where the best place is, and like stop at different business incubators and be like, hey, like, what do you have? Like, what is the best place? So I drove from Virginia to Virginia Beach. Then I drove to Indiana. Then I drove to Tampa. Then I drove to Arkansas, California, North Dakota, then ended back up in Gainesville, Florida at the Innovation Hub. And that's where I am now. And so I've been here ever since I graduated college. And it was just, I saw the entire country. And I knew that one of the best places was Gainesville, Florida. I don't know why I knew that, but I ended up here, and you know, that's what happened.
Okay, everybody, I'm sure that you're already convinced that this is the kind of person and the kind of consciousness that should be in Washington and should have a seat in the House of Representatives. And I don't think he'd be calling a colleague a fucking bitch. Don't you think that's kind of pretty proven? For those of you who might not know, that's what Ted Yoho called AOC. I didn't just pull that out of it.
No, yeah, I was like, wow. Yeah, so
With great respect.
That guy is my current representative, and you know, we'll probably need to talk about this a little bit later. But you know, what he did was shocking, but not surprising.
Oh,
I
listen,
mean,
that have been called out. We're not
but
that
it's
shocked by it, but I certainly like that she called him out on it the way she did.
I love that she called him out, because that's what you need to do. Progressives and Democrats need to actually stand up and fight. No more playing defensive. No more sitting back and taking punches. It is time, especially in the middle of a pandemic, especially when people are worried about them losing their houses, their homes, their entire livelihoods. We can't just sit back and hope things will get better. I mean, you asked why I'm running. I'm running because there's no other choice. Like for so many people right now, we either change the way things are or we don't survive. We either change the way things are or Florida's underwater. Like that's, and I'm not being dramatic. That's what's going to happen. And so for a lot of people, especially the people on our campaign, it's exciting, but it's necessary.
Yeah, there's an urgency now. And what has happened, for anybody listening that might be in any way confused by this, because over the last 40 years, particularly, our government has been so unduly influenced by corporate money, of course. The bottom line of short-term profit for corporate forces has come before the long-term good, health and security of the people and of the planet. And we all agree that at this point, we don't even have the luxury of deciding whether or not we want to make that shift. It's the only sustainable option for the human race. And going back to that issue of seeing whether or not electoral politics is an essential factor in the transformation that we all desire, which I certainly believe that it is, and Adam obviously does, or he wouldn't be running. The issue here is that so many of the regressive collective behavioral patterns are bad public policy. And those patterns will not be changed. We will not be able to turn this thing around until we get people in there who will proactively legislate good public policies. Hello. So that's where we get into issues. So tell us, Adam, what are your favorite issues? What are the most important issues in your mind? And what would you be fighting for and standing for as a member of the House of Representatives?
Yeah. So you hit on one thing right before I get to that. You hit on one thing absolutely beautifully. I coach high school soccer. I've coached college soccer as well. And the one thing I know is that if a player does not have the basic fundamentals down, you cannot build a good player. You cannot build something sustainable. So for instance, the building behind me is a small business incubator in downtown Gainesville, Florida. When I first got here, they basically told me that there was one path to success for a startup. You have the idea, you get some people to throw some money at it, and then you raise money, inflate the value, raise more money, inflate the value again, and eventually you get out before it all collapses. And hopefully it doesn't collapse, but more than likely it's going to. You get out and you're able to sell it off to somebody who wants to buy it. And when I first heard that, my response was, what you are telling me is that we want consolidation. We don't want sustainable businesses. We want whatever we can build as quickly as possible, doesn't matter if it's a deck of cards or not, and get out so that we're okay. And I stood up and I
meaning in work.
Yeah, but it's meaningless. I mean, not even just meaningless, but if the definition of success is that we are allowing giant companies to basically take over, like the end goal is making a big company bigger. Like a big company buys you, which means that you didn't actually make something worthwhile. You didn't make something that could stand up. And my question at that point was, if we're not caring about our community, because most of those big companies, they're not in our community. The money that we bring into our community goes to a New Jersey banker, it goes somewhere else. If that money's not staying here, like what's the point? And so for me, the biggest thing was, can we make sustainable businesses? Can we actually have the fundamentals of an economy that allows us to stand up instead of just being run on a sugar high? And I think that's what we've had for the last, well, since 2008. Like I've never lived in an economy that worked. I've never lived in a place where we didn't have corporate welfare.
So, Adam has talked about so much there. I want to unpack a little bit about this. A hot word, and for good reason, going on in politics right now has to do with monopoly. And we have antitrust laws for a reason. The antitrust laws had to do with the fact that you would not allow any individual corporate interest to be so big that there was no room for other countries to compete. For other companies to compete. Now that's why you might have watched the hearings, the congressional hearings this last week with Mark Zuckerberg, with Jeff Bezos, et cetera. Because as long as Jeff Bezos, for instance, is taking up so much of the oxygen, how are the young Jeff Bezoses of the world ever going to grow up and participate in the economy? How are the young Mark Zuckerbergs ever going to get started? And the reason that economic opportunity is so important, how can you be a capitalist if you don't have any capital? So if your only goal is maybe you'll do well enough that one of them can eat you up, this is not a vital economy. This is not a free market economy. This is as against high-minded conservative principles as it is against high-minded liberal principles. So to hear someone like yourself, Adam, so get that. And by the way, you've probably read it, but if the rest of you haven't, there's a book out now by a man named Matthew Stoller called Goliath. And it really does take this this anti-monopoly thing. And I know this is a pop culture allusion, reference, but to some of you, you're going to say, oh, I get it now. Look back at the movie Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. Because Richard Gere was all about buying these companies and chopping them up, and what it did to people and what it did to people's lives. And I know that was really one of the first instances in some real popular culture reference where you could say, oh, that's what that means. So I'm so excited to hear you, Adam, because you are bringing economics home and you're bringing it down, and you're bringing it down for so many people in your generation, particularly, who want to be entrepreneurs and know that there's really, with all this monopolization going on, there's no room for them to get in. And the best they can hope for is to get in far enough to be bought up by one of them. And it just takes all the creativity, the productivity, the meaning, and the soul out of business and out of the economy. So I'm glad that you're onto that, and that's one of the things you want to stand for.
Yeah. So one thing I always, I tell people this all the time, and it's something they didn't know. The original progressive movement was made up of Republicans.
Yeah.
It was Teddy Roosevelt in the 1890s who said that Rockefeller and JP Morgan, corporate cartels, trust monopolies, they were killing capitalism.
That's right.
They were
And
killing the
that's
free
why,
market.
absolutely. And that's why Franklin Roosevelt said, I'm not killing capitalism, I'm saving capitalism.
Yeah. And
Because
what I don't
monopoly
understand,
type of free market, there's no free except for a few people.
so they called Teddy Roosevelt a socialist. They called FDR a socialist. And the only reason they called them socialists is because they wanted to get rid of corporate socialism. They wanted to get rid of corporate welfare. That's what we have. So when people say, I don't like socialism, I say, well, you already live in a world that is socialist. Like you live in a world where it's basically all the wealth goes to one place. And if you really are a true conservative, then you're on board with me. And you are on my side, and we're going to go do this because corporatism is corporate socialism.
Yeah, and there are a lot of Republicans today who so totally realize that what people like Donald Trump represent is the opposite of high-minded conservative values. Martin Luther King said, if they give it to the rich, they call it a subsidy. If they give it to the poor, they call it a handout. Yeah, what did
exactly.
he say?
Exactly.
And rugged individualism for the poor. Okay, what else?
Language matters,
So
right?
Absolutely, language matters. I understand where you're coming from. I think everybody does. But what are your, other than I suppose, really enforcing these antitrust laws? I'm sure that means you want to break up the tech companies, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and some of the television and all of that.
Broadband should be a public utility. We should, I mean, we built the interstate highway system. We should build an interstate broadband system. Sorry?
When you were talking about the highway system, I said a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower, right? Right. Okay. So
we should build a broadband system that covers the entirety of the United States. Like that's the next step. And I think that, you know, we have monopolies, especially in that industry as well. You got Comcast, AT&T, you have all these ones, and they are the most hated corporations in the entire world. So let's break them up. And so I think your next question was going to be, you know, what are the policy points that we're really running our campaign on? And
I like you a lot, Adam.
Yeah, I like you too. Well, you know, I've started a couple companies. My first company.
I'm sitting here thinking about what you've done at by 27, and like the next few decades are going to be quite something to behold. So go on, keep talking.
I hope so.
I pretty much know.
Right out of college, I started a company. I was in college, and somebody came to me from Florida, and they said, "I'm selling this peppermint essential oil," and I bought it, and it was fake, and I didn't know. And I just had to pull $60,000 worth of it off the market because I got screwed. Can you test it? Can you make sure that I'm not going to, you know, get screwed again? And I thought, okay, sure. So my lab in college, like we started doing this, right? And after about a year, I realized, you know, this might be bigger than just one company. And so when I got down to Gainesville, Florida, I started testing these products. And what I realized was 60% of the products I was testing were fake. Biggest companies in the world, best marketing in the world. Everyone thinks it's the best product in the world, and it's not.
Well, that's where comes in consumer protection, right?
Well, they don't. There are no consumer protection laws for that, and nothing that's enforced.
Tried. I mean, Elizabeth Warren has stood for that more than any other person in our government.
100%. But what I started to realize is almost every industry that we have, the people that have won it, the people that are the biggest are not the ones with the best products. They're the ones with the shiniest marketing, the nice packaging, the ones that make their stuff look like it's expensive, but it's fake. Packaging. And so I started to realize that all the things that we talk about, so for instance, I talk about Medicare for all, right? Mm-hmm. But what do I talk about when I talk about Medicare for all? And this is something that progressives have not hit on enough, I think. What we are talking about is removing middlemen, scammers who take 30% of your money and do nothing, add no value, but have convinced us they should be in the industry. They take that money and they deny you care. I'm talking about the insurance companies. No conservative or independent likes insurance companies. Let's just start there. And when you say you're paying 30% more than you should be simply because we have a middleman and a lot of fat, and you say, look, I just want to come in, I want to get rid of the middleman, I want to cut the fat, I want to trim it, I want to make sure that it's a free market, you get some people on board. And so when I talk about Medicare for all,
you're losing me a little bit, and you're losing, I think, maybe some other people too. So sure. What are the policy?
Medicare for all. Here's why. All Small right. businesses right now, they pay $8,000 per employee. Mm-hmm. You get rid of that, that's a small business tax cut. You do something like universal child care, most families are paying $8,000 to $13,000 per year. You get rid of that cost, that's a middle class tax cut.
Well, I hear everything you're saying.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think for me, I think we need to stay away from just an economic justification for doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody, I have had a shoulder injury and I have to have surgery later this week, this week. And I have spent a lot of hours thinking about what my situation would be if I did not have medical insurance.
Yeah.
And the idea that anybody would be going through this in this country, in the richest country in the world, that anyone might be going through what I'm going through right now and not being able to afford the treatment that I need, the surgery that I need, is so horrifying to me that I am viscerally, I'm more impassioned and almost radicalized on the issue of Medicare for all than ever before. But I also think what you're saying is important, particularly since you're running in a district that has a lot of Republicans in it. So you've got Gainesville, which is traditionally Democratic, surrounded by a lot of red suburbs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're able to make that argument in a very persuasive way to Republicans, the economic argument that you're making now, right?
What I've found is that no matter what we're talking about, you should always be approaching someone in the language that they speak.
I think that's correct.
So for me, Medicare for all, above all else, it's a moral issue.
Mm-hmm.
If one person doesn't have healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, then nobody's safe.
Nobody's safe. That's exactly.
There is not a single person who should ever have to worry about their kid getting cancer and going bankrupt on top of it.
When I think of, yes, I couldn't agree.
That's what we're talking about. We are talking about the moral issue. And I know, I grew up in a very, like I said, I grew up in a conservative household. I grew up in a Republican. I grew up in the church. And what I was always taught is the greatest radical of all time, he didn't spend his time with the political establishment. He did not spend his time with the religious leaders of the day. In fact, he called them hypocrites. The people he spent his time with were the poor, the hungry, the sick, the needy, the downtrodden, those rejected by society, those who people didn't even think were natural to their culture. And those are the people he spent time with and focused on. But we don't do that. And so when I talk about Medicare for all, I will never water down policy. But depending on who I'm talking to, if the emotional argument is the one that'll work, I'm going to speak to the emotional argument. If it's the financial one, I'm going to speak to that.
And a lot of people want to feel that we're being responsible for our economics and want to hear also how we're going to pay for it. So I couldn't agree more. Everybody, 100%. I want to be really clear that Adam's website is For the Many, Not Just Me, all spelled out. For the Many, Not Just Me.com. And like I said, I hope that you will support him with your dollars as well as your love. A couple of people we have here who'd like to ask you questions. Is that okay with you, Adam? Okay, I'm going to start with a young woman named Elsa Mosley. So let's bring Elsa on. Hey, how are you?
Hi, Marianne. Hi, Adam. How are you both doing?
Tell me something about yourself, Elsa. What's your background?
So I am a recent graduate that currently lives in Iowa City, but I teach English.
Great, great, great. What grade?
I teach university students.
Oh, wow. And what particular era or part of literature?
So I actually normally teach English overseas to diplomats in training. So I teach them about American history, European history, and also just try to build understanding between their country and the United States.
Right. So what are your questions for Adam?
My question for Adam is, so the issues that you've been discussing with Marianne, such as corporatism and lack of healthcare, those problems do not impact everyone in our society equally. How will you incorporate more perspectives in policymaking, and how will you make Washington more inclusive?
So I think there's a lot of things I think that most people don't even think of when they think of Washington. For instance, most of the people who are interning on Capitol Hill, they're not getting paid. They're not really, I mean, the only reason you're able to go to Washington in general is if you have enough money or family money to be able to work in Washington for free, essentially. Maybe room and board gets covered, but nothing more than that. And so that excludes a ton of people. It excludes anyone who's actually like hungry. It doesn't matter like what you look like or who you are. Unless you have the money, you're not going to be able to go work in Washington. And so I think we need to kind of, that needs to be a focus as well. But then obviously we need to make Washington look like the United States. I mean, it should not, I mean, right now, for instance, like our campaign is the youngest one possibly ever. We're run by college students. We have a completely different perspective than most of the people that have been in Washington for 20, 30 years. And on top of that,
those offices are run by young staff members.
They are run by young staff members, but at the same time, the people at the top, the ideas, they're not. And so, especially not only having the perspective, but having the will to actually carry it out, I think that matters. On top of that, especially inclusivity to begin with, I mean, we need to make sure that we have all different kinds of backgrounds, all different kinds of cultures, all different kinds of people that are actually there talking, because the more we can actually share shared experiences, because that's the biggest thing, shared experiences. Do you actually have lived, like, have you ever had to worry about having 68 cents in your bank account and not having your apartment the next week? I don't think most people in Washington had to do that. I think that would be a big one. What was there was another part to your question. What was it?
It was how will you incorporate more perspectives in policymaking, and how will you make Washington more inclusive?
Yeah, I think you did that. I think also the most important issue of exclusivity and inclusivity is financial, obviously, as you were just saying. So you can have people of various colors, ethnicities, cultures, religions, sex, and sexuality, but if they still don't have the money to give them financial leverage in Washington, they're going to be left out. And I think that's a problem that among the Democrats often, which is the cosmetic change, as though, oh, if this person's Black or this person's Hindu or this person's Muslim, then we have inclusivity. But inclusivity has got to go deeper than that as well, as important as all those things are. So it seems to me, until we get money out of politics, right? And obviously we won't be able to overturn Citizens United anytime soon with the makeup of our current Supreme Court, but would you support a constitutional amendment for public funding of federal campaigns? Because until we have that, how can we really have inclusivity? Because it will mean that the rich will always have more of an influence on public policy than the poor.
Absolutely, 100%. Elsa, you used to, I believe that you used to be an intern in Washington. What are some things that you kind of think, would help, or some of the things that, you've seen that, we could incorporate, when we get there and be able to actually, change some of these things?
Well, thank you for asking me that question, Adam. As you mentioned, I think it is very important to create maybe more accessibility to Washington, to be more representative of our country as a whole. But it's also important to create safe spaces where individuals can genuinely discuss like what's happening in an office. If there's a certain kind of rhetoric being used, to encourage a culture of like genuine discussion, building genuine relationships with people, and not reinforcing a culture of silence or repercussion for maybe speaking about something or dealing with conflict. So creating a healthy work environment for everyone, and making sure that giving everybody the resources they need to be on the same level.
Got that, Adam?
I got that. And I'm sure that I'll have a lot of people telling me the exact same thing and hold my feet to the fire, no matter what. So, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Elsa. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, honey. There's another young woman named Hannah Jacobs, and Hannah has some questions to ask you as well. Hannah Jacobs. Hey, Hannah, how are you? We need you to unmute yourself.
Gotcha.
I know
How are you
I made
doing?
a mistake. Hannah, I heard you say earlier that you have a background in criminal justice and that you yourself are in law school right now.
I'm not in law school. That's part of the plan, hopefully. I just graduated with my degree in political science and psychology from the University of Florida. And I'm going in for my master's in political science.
All right, well, those issues are important right now, right there. So what are your questions for Adam?
So my question to Adam is, I know there's a lot of growing distrust among young people in our institutions and just a lot of lack of faith in our government. And I'm wondering how you think we can get young people and college people involved in politics and more interested and more motivated to participate.
I think that we're starting to see, a lot of it. I think we're starting to see a lot more to begin with. But I think the biggest thing is when we talk about like representation, when we talk about government in general, there has been a lot of distrust. But I kind of always think about it this way. I would never hire someone to one of my businesses who, number one, didn't like what they were doing, and number two, didn't want to do the best they possibly could. But for some reason, we keep sending people to Washington in general who hate the government, but they're going to work in the government. Why are we hiring these people? Why are we sending them to Washington? And then on top of that, when you look, when the majority of people who are actually in Washington, they are 50, 60, 70, some people are 80 years old. If the person you're going to go vote for at the ballot box is your same age, are you more or less likely to actually believe that they're going to represent you? Now, if the person is 20 or 30 years old, who do you think they're probably going to understand and have the actual life experience of? And so I think when we talk about this, we talk about a couple things. Number one, we have to talk about the fact that people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they're working. It's difficult to get to the ballot box. It is difficult to vote. And on top of that, what we have seen is that polling locations, especially on campuses, especially in other locations, have been shut down or the hours have been reduced. And what this does, yeah, it's voter suppression. But for them, they cannot wait in line for 6 hours to vote because they either have kids or they have a job or they have class. And so we have to make it as easy possible to vote, especially for young people and especially for historically disadvantaged groups that have been taken advantage of at the ballot box forever. And yeah, sorry, what was that, Marianne?
Sorry, HR 1, the House Resolution 1 actually covered those things where voting would be automatic on your 18th birthday. I personally think we ought to make it 17, actually, where it would be a holiday. The founders made it on a Tuesday because that's when people brought their wares to market. It should be either on a Saturday or declare it a national holiday. And of course, as long as the Republicans are in charge of the Senate, they don't want to do that. And what we're living in right now, as both of you know, but I just want to make sure everybody is aware, and I'm sure people are, with what's going on now, the attacks, the undermining of the post office, the closing down of so many polling places. In this election in November 3rd, I think it's reasonable to expect that even more difficulty than usual will be created because they're working to create those difficulties right now. So when you say people don't have time to stand in line for 6 hours, I hope that there will be people this year who understand if it takes 10 hours, we've got to stay out there. That's how critically important this particular election is. I would assume you would agree with that.
100%. But on top of that, I also think that the best way to get people to vote, to care, is to be real with them, to be an actual person. I mean, people don't want the ultra fine, ultra polished person running for office. They want people who actually have a working background. They want people that have had to struggle. I mean, right now, we don't send our best. We send whoever can afford it to buy the seat.
Okay, but I've run for office, so let me make something very clear. People want it, but what the people want is divergent in some very unfortunate ways from what the political elite establishment wants. So I agree with you. People just want people. They want real. And I saw it with audiences and I saw it. But as long as you have all the money from the donor class that is affecting and influencing the political establishments the way they are, and you see it in these primaries. That's why I'm trying to support these down ballot candidates, because of all the candidates. And we saw it on the Senate races as well. That's why we have Hickenlooper rather than Romanoff, and Hickenlooper is a nice man. I met him on the campaign, but this is where the corporate money went. This is why we have McGrath rather than Booker or Boyer. That's why we have Sarah Gideon rather than Betsy Sweet. So I think people really need to understand why it's so important to support progressives like yourself, as I said before, everybody, because this is not where the establishment money is going. But Adam is this is a very unique race, because sometimes when you're talking about the progressive candidates, it's this little engine that we can do it. But Adam's got it going on. A lot of people are saying about Adam, no, he can do this. He can absolutely do this. But please, when is your primary, Adam?
It is August 18th, so it is coming up very quickly.
So if you feel this young man belongs in Congress, please do take out your credit card and do what you can. Go to forthemany.notjustme.com. You can also do this through a Progressive Candidate Summit. It's all the same thing. So Hannah,
can I mention one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right? Do you know, Marianne, how expensive it is to get on the ballot for Congress in Florida?
No, but I know for a presidential candidate to get on all 50 states was $260,000. Tell me how much it is to get on the ballot for a congressional candidate in Florida.
It is the second highest in the country. It is over $10,000 to get on the ballot here in Florida.
So, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, I want you to join with me for a moment. Let's think about this. Think about some of the people. Think about single mothers. Think about teachers. Think about anybody. And remember, because we talk about this on the summit a lot, the founders called the House of Representatives the People's House. The whole idea was that it would be about the people. It would be the candle maker. It would be the farmer. It would be the blacksmith. That's what the founders wanted. That's why when people say, oh, what was AOC? She was a bartender. That's the point. That's the point. And so the idea is to have people from all different backgrounds, but how would the average American working class person be able to afford the $10,000? Who has $10,000 just lying around? How many Americans who might be the wisest, college professors, high school teachers, people who would have so much to give, but $10,000 to get on that ballot? This is what we're talking about here. And this is what's so wrong. Look, I know, you know what I think a lot of people want to know, Adam, right now? Their question to you would be, why $10,000? And who does that money go to? So I think a lot of people would like to hear the answer.
Yeah, the $10,000 is basically so that you can stop working class people from running for office.
That's exactly right. I was hoping that's what you were going to say.
Matt, and young people too. Young people too. Young people don't have that.
Yes.
Unless you come from money, you don't get to run for office, unless you get very, very lucky.
That's right.
On top of that, the way that they have set it up so that you could be able to get on the ballot without paying that amount of money is by getting petitions from people. Well, what happened this year? We had a pandemic. You weren't allowed to go get petitions because it's dangerous. And on top of that, here in Florida, you have to get 5,000 petitions just to get on the ballot for Congress. Whereas in New York, I think it's 1,200. So in some parts of the country, you want to know why the Florida House is so Republican? Well, it's because they stop people from running who would have a shot. You're not able to build a grassroots campaign unless you have the financial backing. And so the question is, how do we fix politics? Well, we fix the small issues that allow the good people to actually run if they don't have the money. We actually create it so the grassroots movements can get going. We make it so that we have publicly funded elections and that we're not just relying on big donors and corporate interests. That's how you fix government at this point.
That's the cancer underlying all the cancers, money and politics. And of course, one of my very favorite progressive congressmen ever came from Florida, and that's Alan Grayson. So you'd have some big shoes there.
Hannah, I know Alan. We've talked.
He's the best. And if he's giving you advice, then you're very fortunate. He's a good friend of mine as well. I think the world of him. Hannah, anything you want to make sure that Adam hears from you that you feel strongly about, that you want him to stand for and to hear from you before we let you go?
Well, I do just want to add your point about, electing young people to Congress is a huge selling point for a lot of young people to get them interested. I know AOC is a hero to a lot of my friends who might not otherwise have been interested. But the big thing is also probably making sure we know that, it's not just the big, large corporate and wealth interests that are controlling everything that we do. We want to know that when a politician says that they're going to do something, it's for the right reasons. It's not because someone's, funding them. And, you feel like you already feel like you have such a small voice as a young person, and so I feel like hearing that politicians were doing things for the right reasons and with everyone's interest in mind would be really refreshing for a lot of people. And especially in the new age of social media, I think that I follow you on everything. So I know you're really up to date with all that stuff. And I think that's important nowadays. So thank you.
How old are you, Hannah?
I'm 21.
Can you see yourself running at some point, do you think?
Take this as my formal announcement. I'm just kidding. We'll see. We'll see one day. I'm going to do my master's first and then maybe get some real world experience before I run, but we'll see.
Well, the world will be lucky if you do. Thank you so much for being with us. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So Adam, let's talk about what's happening in the country right now. It's to say it's worrisome is an understatement. 30 million people are facing eviction. We had 40 million people who were hungry even before the pandemic. We have such a surge at the food banks. They're completely overrun. Hunger was already an issue in the United States. We have Steve Mnuchin, a very, very wealthy man himself, who has the audacity to say that he doesn't want to give that $600 unemployment because he feels it would disincentivize people from working. I currently believe that the country's a powder keg right now. And it feels to me like the political establishment on both sides doesn't have a clue the roiling forces that are underneath. There's like a volcano that could blow. You're going to be in the House of Representatives. We need to hear, how do you see this and what are you going to do about it?
I think you're 100% correct. After 2008, we saw the Occupy movement. We saw the Tea Party spring up. That was child's play compared to what's going to happen now. I mean, I think it was around 8 to 10 million people over the course of like 4 or 5 years, were evicted or had to lose a home or something happened. We are talking about 28 million people in the span of the next 2 to 3 months that are going to be evicted, are going to lose their housing, and a lot of them are going to end up on the streets. I spent the day a couple weeks ago at a organization here in Gainesville, Florida called Grace. Grace works to find permanent housing for chronically unhoused individuals. And I went to their facility and they've done an excellent job with COVID. They haven't had a single case of COVID with their homeless population yet. And I went there just to, see what they were doing. And they talked to me about housing. Housing, if you don't have a roof over your head, you don't have stability. You don't have the ability to work your way up. We talk about incentivizing people to work their way up. If you don't have housing, it doesn't matter how much incentive you have.
To live.
Yeah. And so what they told me is right now, by the numbers, they're going to get overrun in the next month. Yeah. The United States is going to get overrun. And I can tell you right now, the thing that will make people lose their minds the most is if they're fearing that, number one, they're going to be on the streets, and number two, that they cannot feed their family. And that is where we're at right now. We have people who just gave $6-7 trillion to buy crappy debt that nobody ever should have touched and bail out hedge funds and people that were speculators and gamblers.
They took care of the private jet companies.
Yes, that did happen. And they told us that we should be satisfied with a $1,200 check once. One time.
Call that bridge liquidity.
Yeah. Well, that man doesn't get to talk about anything financial ever after the scams that he has pulled in his career. And so what we have realized is, number one, that people, and I talk about this a lot. I say, look, we're not asking for much. We're not asking for the world. We are simply asking to be able to afford a home, start a family, and have a little bit of money left over at the end of the week so we could maybe go to the movie theater and not feel bad about it. That's not radical. That's the American dream. And so what we are talking about is just making sure that people can have the basics. And what we have had is we have had people tell us that the poor or somebody poorer than us or an immigrant or a refugee, they're the reason that you can't get ahead. They're the reason you don't have a good paying job. When the reason we don't have those things is because we have corporations that undercut everyone else in the market, drive them under, consolidate them, and then replace those jobs with a job that pays a third. And the way to get around that.
So let's not leave that part out.
Yeah.
So I think also a lot of people don't realize, if you're in Canada, for instance, every Canadian citizen is being given $2,000 a month as long as this pandemic lasts.
Spain too.
And in England, they're getting 80% of their salary. I mean, so it's not just on the level of the biology and the medical issues involved with COVID that other countries were so much further along with us than us, but also on the economic level. And at this point, it's not just soulless, it's cruel.
Yeah.
And I think people see those. But you're running, I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say 100%. Like we are, and you were about to say that we are running in a deep red district. We are running with small towns, with people, and here's the way here's what I always tell people. My grandfather is Republican, red as they're ever going to come. 40 years ago, his small town in southwestern Iowa, they looked around and they saw other small towns starting to dry up. They saw the family-owned businesses that have been there for 40 or 50 or 60 years drying up, and their schools got consolidated, and eventually the towns were just gone. And they looked around and said, well, why is that? Well, the reason that was there was a company who kept moving in. They kept moving in and they kept undercutting the prices slightly and driving out the family-owned businesses that have been there for 40, 50, 60 years and replacing those jobs. That company was Walmart. And my grandfather's Republican red town stood up and said, we're not letting Walmart come in here and destroy our way of life. And that's what they did. What we just did is hand the money that should have gone to the people to Walmart, to all of these giant monopolies who say, we don't care about you, we care about our profits or our executives. And people are starting to realize that both wings of both parties, the corporate wings of both parties, they're at fault. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat. When you are struggling to survive and you are scared, the only thing that you want is security and stability. And if somebody is willing to give you that, then they will join you. And that's what the progressive movement has to do. That's what the Democrats have to do, because the Democrats historically have been the party of the people, focused on people's well-being. And so just like you said, other countries have decided to give $2,000 a month checks to everyone. But we didn't do that because we cared more about the people, the New Jersey bankers, than we did about the people who live in small towns. And so that's what we have to focus on. You know, we've had trickle down economics for 40 years, right? Well, it hasn't worked. What if we try the exact opposite? What if we try trickle up economics?
Well, let's be clear, it has worked. What it has done, it has worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who promulgated it, the idea of the massive transfer of wealth into the hands of 1%. The idea, of course, being that all that wealth would trickle down, lift all boats. It has not lifted all boats. It has left millions of people without even a life vest. It has destroyed our middle class and created the largest income inequality in almost 100 years, 1% controlling 90% of the wealth. But I think it's very interesting to note that Milton Friedman, who was the main articulator and architect of trickle-down economics, he said, none of this will work without universal basic income. So the Reaganite forces in the 1980s just took the first part and didn't have any use for the second part. But Milton Friedman himself said, no, you have to have universal basic income, of course, or it will not be safe. But so many things, whether it has to do with Medicare for all, universal basic income, canceling the college loans, making college more affordable, higher education. These are things which were first introduced into the conversation in a way that were easy to mock and to minimize and to invalidate as some far left idea. Today, the American people see that this should be seen as centrist. 86% of the American people say they want Medicare for all, which is why I don't understand why why it's not on the platform of the Democratic National Committee. I don't get it. Do you get that?
I'm for Medicare for all. I'm for UBI. I'm for a Green New Deal. I consider myself to be a moderate.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand.
So let me ask you a question then, because I think a lot of people have this question about some of our own progressive heroes. You go there, and some of those very powerful Democrats are going to call you up. Adam, we're so glad you're here. They're going to invite you over to dinner. They're going to invite you into meetings. And about 6 months from now, we start looking at you and we think, wow, he seems a little bit less out there than he was, a little bit less willing to make a stand for what we thought he stood for than he was. He's gotten eaten up a little bit by the machinery. So what are you going to tell us to make us think that would never happen to you?
Oh, this one's the fun one. If I ever wavered, and this is why I keep bringing. Oh, I know you do. That's what's terrifying. That terrifies me. But what terrifies me more is on our team is made up of activists. It is made up of young people who they care deeply. Not only that, but like I'm 130 pounds and all of them could beat me up. So let's just start there. But they basically, at this point, the thing, especially where the Democratic Party has gone wrong, is they forget the activists, or the activists don't hold their feet to the fire when they're actually in office, because activism does not start just to get somebody elected. Activism starts the day they step their foot into office, because if they're not pushing for the things in office that you sent them there to do, they should not be there. Well, and so it's as much on the politician as it is on his team. It's as much on his team as it is on the outside forces. You need a strong outside force to push you. You need a team that's going to hold you accountable. And that, at the end of the day, I think is what I have, and I think what most people need to have. And so if I wasn't going to do the things that they sent me there to do, number one, you would not be the first one to tell me. Although I would hear from you, I am sure. But yes, you have to have people hold you accountable, no matter who you are.
I think you're pointing out something really important. One of the places where, on a purely political level, Republicans tend to be more sophisticated is that they know that the activism does not stop the day somebody takes office. Democrats and people on the left have had a tendency to think, okay, he's elected or she's elected, now I can relax. And this is very important. I think people have learned the hard way that that is simply not the case, and that we have to be on it with our activism after someone is in office every bit as much as we were activistic trying to help them get elected. And I'm glad
FDR would not have done the New Deal if he had not been forced to. I think people forget that. He was forced to do a New Deal.
And Lyndon Johnson.
The greatest giants and heroes of the Democratic Party of really history, it was not them who necessarily led everything. It was their team that pushed them and the force behind them that did not let them stop.
Well,
that is what we have to remember.
Woodrow Wilson did everything he could to suppress the women's suffrage movement. He was the one who threw those women in prison. But in the final analysis, he was presiding over the passage of the 19th Amendment.
Exactly. It's the John Lewis model. It's the good trouble. At the end of the day, you should be causing trouble. You should be causing good trouble. And you should be doing so much of it that nobody has a choice but to do what you say.
Well, we need to know that you'll be causing good trouble once you get there as well. I don't think that anybody doubts. You've heard Adam Christensen for this last hour. What happened to him? You've been listening to Adam for the last hour and his lovely friends. And I hope that you will support him. His primary race is on August 18th. Any dollar you send, $5, $1, anything you can, would be very much appreciated. You can go to forthemany.notjustme.com. You can go to progressivecandidatesummit.com. I don't know what happened to him. We seem to have lost him. Hopefully he will be back with us momentarily. But
I'm still here. I don't know what went. I don't know what went wrong.
I can't see. Do you have to push on your? Oh, there he is.
All right, I think we got it.
This has been great spending time with you. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to give to people, Adam? I'm sure they'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I got into this because at the end of the day, I didn't really feel like I had a choice. I didn't feel like, if nobody else is going to fix our problems, then we don't get to complain about them if we're not going to do something about them. And so for me and my team and the people here, especially in North Central Florida, we decided that not only are we going to run, but we're going to build infrastructure that allows not only this movement to happen, but to continue. We decided that we have our sights set not just on a congressional seat, but on flipping Florida in general. We partnered with House districts within our congressional districts so we can get out the vote in November like has never happened before. We built an online apparatus so that we could actually get out a message. That hasn't happened here. And at the end of the day, we were built completely by people under the age of 23. Because right now what we understand is if we don't fight for the things that we love, if we don't fight for our communities or our friends, then what are we ever going to fight for? And if you really want to change things, then you need to build political power. You need to actually have a seat at the table. I mean, Hamilton came out on Disney Plus, and like people are now starting to realize that the stuff that matters is the stuff we don't see. And if we actually have a spot and a seat, and it's if we're actually in the room, we have a say. And so for us, that's what we're trying to do. And so we are in North Central Florida. We are running to flip Ted Yoho's seat. And what we understand is that, yeah, Ted Yoho's not running again, but his donors are, his infrastructure is, everything that he has built, it's still here. And it's just going to elect a new person with a new face and a new name, same ideology. And if we don't tear down the ideology, if we don't replace the structure, then nothing ever fundamentally changes. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're starting in North Central Florida. And hopefully we're going to be able to inspire some people to do it all across the country. So it was wonderful to be on with you. It was finally wonderful to be face-to-face virtually, but you know, so thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Everybody, you heard it here. This is Adam Christensen. He is running in Florida's District 3. He is an example of the consciousness that is coming up from the bottom of things in this country, but I could not agree with him more that we must take that consciousness and build a political container for it in order that it be serious political force. I know you probably share with me great enthusiasm for the idea that Adam will be in Congress, joining other voices such as his who really do want to transform this country and change its direction as much as you and I do. In order to do that, though, we need to help him so he can help us. So I hope you will go to his website for theminitenotjustme.com. Also, if you know people in Florida, in that Gainesville area, in District 3, talk it up, talk it up, talk it up. Put all this stuff, talk about your experience listening to him, create the buzz. And I know that I speak for many people, Adam, in saying thank you for running. We're with you all the way. I hope that you just sail through. You made an excellent point just now. Yoho's not running anymore, but those who represent the same regressive policies will be running, and it's time for us to take a stand and turn things around. I hope with all my heart you'll have a chance to do that, and I also have a strong feeling you will. God bless you, honey. Thank you very much, everybody, and until next time, have a wonderful evening and tomorrow and the days after that. God bless us all. Thank you.